additional opening remarks, except for a few announcements. On October 30th and November 6th if required. The regular meeting in November on the 13th will be the occasion when we would vote to advertise the budget, with it posted for public review by November 20th, and then a vote to adopt tentatively scheduled for our December meeting, which is December 11th. An executive session of the Borough Council of the Borough of Gettysburg was conducted immediately following the adjournment of the October 16th, 2023 Council 2024 Budget Workshop meeting, consistent with Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act. An executive session will be conducted immediately following the adjournment of this evening's Borough Council Work Session meeting, consistent with Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act, for the following purposes. 1, to review and discuss matters of borough business which, if conducted in public, could lead to the disclosure of information or matters of confidentiality protected by law. We have no special presentation this evening. I'm going to go ahead and ask for any public comment on items on the agenda. Okay. And that takes us to the employee manual. We are.
So if you remember, the outstanding item that the council was reviewing was in in chapter 33. And I will defer to Solicitor Eastman to specifically reference section 33.3, which is really a standalone policy of the borough and probably should be removed from the overall employee manual.
Okay.
And this is the basis of because candidly, it was the recommendation of Gretchen that because we were in the process of potentially revising that provision, that we just hold off until that provision was revised. However, my last discussion with Attorney Kroll, it appears that he's going to have some substantial proposed revisions to that dealing on issues of liability, which I really don't want to discuss. And candidly, I think he needs to present to council those issues along with the rewrite. So candidly, we just need to move forward with this. So it's my recommendation that we go ahead and remove that. It was a standalone policy anyway, and that we remove it. It's kind of misplaced anyway in the workplace violence prevention provisions, and adopt the handbook so that you can have that in place.
I'm a little surprised because when we talked to Attorney Kroll, there was only one item that required that he suggested revising, and that's been revised in this manual. So,
Well, the other thing is
I presume
we
you've
could,
spoken to him more recently.
as I can forward, I've spoken to him fairly recently. He,
Okay.
yeah,
It's probably been a month
We
or
spoke
so.
September 14th.
he indicated he had spoken to you, and the revised provision that actually we got from Ms. Love had removed the mayor from that. Anyway, in my last conversation, he had indicated that he thought further revisions were necessary from Gretchen's revisions to that. And he believed that what he needed to do was put things in writing and present that, be present to council and present it to discuss in executive session his rationale for his proposed revisions, so.
It's kind of confounding.
Yeah, I mean, like, to sit with him, Matt and I had a Zoom call with him. Well, it wasn't Zoom. What was it? Teams.
Sure.
Same thing, more or less. And he presented that single item that essentially the mayor couldn't investigate the chief because the chief reports to the mayor. That was essentially the discussion point.
His concern was regarding dealing with essentially policymakers, so.
Right.
Or could, yeah, because she didn't have part of
As the chief policy officer.
Chief policy officer of that,
Yeah.
of the police department.
Although I would argue that council has.
We argued that.
That said, I just
Because-
spoke to Rolf. I was away last week, but I spoke to him on I believe, October 11th. And at that point, he indicated that he had further revisions. And I requested, I said, you need to put, I mean, if you're going to revise it, we need to have it in writing. He said, he said, that's only fair. He said, candidly, he would prefer making those revisions and presenting them to the council so the council could ask questions, review that with him, et cetera. But that would be in an executive session.
I mean, I understand that it was a standalone policy, and so it could make sense to keep it as a standalone policy, but I think we had a good intent here in including it in the handbook so that employees do have an easy reference should they have a question about the procedure, whether it regards themselves or another person in the organization. I'm a little off-put that we had not heard anything from Attorney Kroll in over a month about this, so it sort of feels like a curveball at this moment.
So where do we stand now?
Well, I apologize, I'm only reporting to you
Yeah, I guess
precisely
my
what was.
question would be the procedure for adopting the handbook. So that's a resolution?
It can be, yeah. That would be an appropriate way.
Is there any type of advertising requirement for said resolution?
No.
So we could discuss this with Mr. Kroll, say, the November work session or prior, and adopt it
Sure.
in December.
Sure, I just was concerned about the time frame that if you needed or you wanted.
And if we can.
This was taking a longer time than I think anybody anticipated, and candidly, it was, we're talking baseball, it was a curveball when, because again, Ms. Love had made some revisions removing the mayor from that and had provided that. And he indicated that he had still really great concerns and he wanted to, again, make further proposed revisions to that. I just didn't want this holding you up in terms of the calendar.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is have those revisions by our November meeting. Perhaps, we can arrange to have that discussion or receive them in writing by then, and then discuss them either at the, some of it, I guess, will be during executive session, it sounds like. But some
I
of
think
it-
he wants to.
Some of it could be at the November work session, if that works out, and then adopt it in December. And if for some reason we're unable to make those things happen, that we could then at that point remove it and vote on December without it. My concern is much like Matt's, that you're trying to hand your employees a reference, and you're going to hand them an incomplete reference. So it just seems that if it's all possible, we should hand them a complete reference manual.
Sure.
If we're able to.
Yeah.
But I was concerned with this being placed on on this work session, that, in terms of the timing and everything that you have going to the end of the year.
I would be
that
more.
you wanted to move forward
Yeah,
at the November meeting, so.
I would be more interested in presenting our staff with a comprehensive document, especially one that fully answers the concerns of the collective bargaining units, and so I think we should wait.
Is that all right with everyone? We kind of take that plot of addressing it in November work session, which hopefully the budget will be complete by then. So have that availability. All right, so we'll look forward to hearing from Mr. Kroll. That takes us on to the ADA space request. Ms. Fissel, do you want to address this? This is an address there at Washington and Breckenridge Streets.
Yes, I believe, I'm not sure if you all saw the request or not. But I think we've done this in 3 other locations when this is requested. They do know that this space would not be for them in particular. It's for anybody that has a handicap placard. It's not a designated space for one person. And they do have a RPP permit.
Yeah, there have been some times in the past when we have done this. Looking at this particular area, I don't know if you want to pull up a map of this. Or one of the things that I noticed with that area, you just want to be a little careful about, is the home in question is at a corner, which is sort of helpful, because there's not actually there's a sort of a limited amount of parking or less parking in that particular block of Washington Street when compared to others. But on Breckenridge Street, it might be more appropriate at the end of
And I
Breckenridge Street.
think she explained that her door is on the Breckenridge Street side.
Yeah, they have a rear access door that goes to Breckenridge Street. But if you look at that block of Washington, there's obviously a setback from the stop sign there in front of the AM East Church. And then you have a few spots, but then there's at least one or two addresses there that have, there's one there, I believe, that has a garage that accesses onto the street, so
Yeah,
there's
it's
no
that
parking
corner.
in front of it. And an alley, United Alley, sits there, so it. I guess thoughts about the ADA space?
I'm fine with it. I apologize for my tardiness. I just got off work. I appreciate when anyone that needs ADA accessibility tells us that they need it. It should not be those of us that are not disabled to judge on where things go. If it is something that we can do to assist residents and visitors, for sure. And if this person is understanding that this spot is not a reserved spot just for them, but any handicapped individual, and they're willing to pay for a permit as well, the residential, is that what it is, RPP?
It is.
Then I'm all for it.
Is Breckenridge Street RPP?
Yes,
Okay, so that's the,
both
Let's
Breckenridge and
make
Washington.
sure that they're both RPP, there's
Yes.
no difference.
Right, yeah. And just so that, I mean, we have specific authority in the Pennsylvania state statutes at section 75 PA-CSA, section 3354 D2, which says precisely that at the request of a person with a disability or severely disabled veteran, local authorities, that's you, may enact on the highway as close as possible to the person's or veteran's place of residence, a sign or signs indicating that the place is reserved for a person with a disability or severely disabled veteran, that no parking is allowed there by others, and that any unauthorized person parking there shall be subject to a fine and may be towed. So there's very specific authority for you to do this under state statute at the request of the person. And in the past, we've had to, I mean, in a couple of situations, we've enacted ordinances, but that's where we've removed areas from RPP so that it could be
Inaccessible.
yeah.
Yeah, for those of you that know me well, you know that part of my job is working with people with special needs and disabilities. And also, as of late, a lot of constituents have been reaching out to me about the lack of handicap accessible parking within the borough. They would like to see more. And we also need to remember, as I'm sure you know, you will know that it's not just our residents, but we get a lot of visitors, and sometimes our visitors that visit us need a handicap spot. So I appreciate this resident for reaching out and wanting to go through this process.
So, I mean, the spot that's at the end of Breckenridge Street's on the correct side of the street for this person's residence, whereas the others are on the opposite side.
Correct.
Any objection to getting that signed?
Nope.
Okay. Let's make it so. All right, that takes us on to GARA, the Recreation Authority. Good evening. Sure. Sure, that is fine. The podium, yeah, gives us the microphone. Folks at home.
Thank you, guys. I'm here to discuss, is it in the packet?
It is.
The MOU, okay. The MOU between GARA, Borough and Cumberland Township. It expires at the end of this year. And so I've been meeting with Charles and David over at Cumberland to discuss the renewal of it and some additional things inside of it. So did you want to discuss the highlighted portions to go over?
Sure.
I think that'd be wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can just start at the beginning.
Yeah. So the main ones that we talked about, if you look through the highlighted portions, I'll just start on page 2. One of the things we discussed was the addition of properties. So if there is a property that wants to become some type of park and recreation, either in the borough or in Cumberland, that we can add that in here. So if Gara is capable of taking over that, we will take over and take care of that area for either the borough or Cumberland Township. Also, the dissolution of the authority. This was in the other, the current MOU. This MOU, we discussed what do we do if, for whatever reason, Gara needs to be dissolved. And in here it states that whatever property, obviously the property of the park will go back to the borough, and then whatever additional properties of Cumberland will go to Cumberland Township. And that's how we're going to split those assets at that time. Hopefully that won't happen, but it's in there just in case. And then, did you want to talk about the operations and capital improvement?
Yeah, I can. When the authority was founded back in 2013, there really was no agreed upon budgetary appropriation for the authority from both Cumberland and the borough. Since then, we've had a better part of a gentleman's agreement, handshake agreement, if you will, that whatever the borough would put into their appropriations through the budget process, Cumberland would match that at 100%. If you remember this year, we haven't talked about it specifically yet because we haven't gotten there in our budget deliberations, but the proposal for 2024 would be the borough provide an appropriation to Gara at the level of $77,500, which is still considerably lower than the historical norm prior to the founding of the authority back in 2013. And then you can see that Cumberland Township has the same amount, $77,500, and then there's a 2% increase on that level over the next 10 years proposed. So this gives certainty from an operational perspective over the next 10 years for Gara. There is a thought out there that, at some point Gara should develop programs for them to become self-funded, and that these appropriations should decrease every year as opposed to increase every year. There's merit to having that conversation. It's my conversations with Aaron, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that best practices in the world of recreation, it's very difficult for recreation facilities to be 100% self-funded. So I think there's always going to be some kind of contribution from the founding partners that needs to be considered. Really, we just need to discuss at what level that would be at. It's my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you remember last year, the borough put in $50,000 additional dollars for capital improvements. That's because Gara hasn't yet really formulated a long-term capital improvement plan with a separate capital projects fund. And so this MOU envisions the creation of that, and at a fairly modest level, both Cumberland Township and the borough would begin to fund that capital improvement program plan. And then, of course, we would hope that some facility fees that the Gara board would impose would augment that capital improvement fund. So just put that in there for proposal for discussion purposes. Where we ultimately go with that, I'm not quite sure, because we haven't ever really discussed this concept before as it relates to Gara. And you can see, I did not populate a theorized capital improvement budget for Cumberland, because we haven't even talked to them about this concept yet. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And like we discussed about Gara trying to find more ways of bringing funds into the park, I'm always open and discussing it and looking into it. We're trying to get new programs into the park. As you know, the farmers market was really successful this year. And so maybe expanding on that and opportunities in that area to make some more funds available to the rec park, as well as some outside entities. We do have rental fees. I try to keep the rental fees as best I can as a minimum for the community members. I did increase the assembly room fees this past year. I also included the baseball fees. I raised that. I try to keep the pavilions at $10, $12 an hour because a lot of our community members use that, especially our low-income families use that, and that's where they have their birthday parties and things. So I try to keep it there, but always trying to find new ways to make some funds for the rec park. So, and I'm always open if anybody wants to talk to me. Come on over. I'm either there or on a tractor somewhere. I didn't say that out loud. All right. So that's the funds. Additional partners. I have reached out to Strabane Township. I will continue to see if anybody would like to join the Gettysburg Area Recreational Authority to bring in more partners, and I'll continue to do that if anybody is willing to, and we have that in there if they would like to join. Utility bills. The Gettysburg Rec Park, we just broke it down here, so it's in the MOU exactly who pays why. We, as GARA, pay the electric, gas, water, sewer, and internet, and the borough pays the stormwater, refuge, and recycling. And as far as that is pretty much the additional, and this is set for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
For additional 10 years, so I will hopefully be back in 2033.
So on the authorizing document, this is the corollary to the lease. We should discuss the length of term on the lease. Right now, it's 10 years, so that will be expiring. There is merit to having the conversation of a longer-term lease as opposed to 10 years. That's very important as it relates to grant funding. When you're applying for a grant, the authorities that will be providing the grant want certainty that GARA is going to be in existence if they're going to give you large sums of money. So a number out of the box, my thought was a 25-year lease. Could be argued you could go 100 years. So that's a council decision, but I do think I would recommend something longer than 10.
I think the original discussion was 50 and then maybe 25, so somewhere in there, yeah. But yeah, that was pretty much, that's the highlight section of the MOU. Any questions? Anything for me? Happy to answer.
Erin, you said you did reach out to Strabane, but you haven't heard anything back yet?
It was a no at this time.
I'm sorry?
It was a no
A no.
at this time. But I'll keep going back every couple of years, see if anybody changes their mind. Yeah.
What, are there must be other models out there in terms of regional parks and like
Yeah,
regional rec-
so we talked about, there are a couple examples. Most places have like a county parks and recreation.
Right.
And breaks it down that way. But there are different examples of how funding sources are funneled, and we talked about Center County. Center County is a great example. I did reach out. I didn't hear anything. I'll try to reach out again exactly how they funnel money through, but there are really good examples, and since we both had that connection to Center County, they're a good example of what Park and Recreation does with their different townships.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that I think everyone should be aware of when we talk about the financial element of it, I do think that the recreation park, at the end of the day, it's the borough's property. I think we have a responsibility to ensure its viability. I think that the staff, Erin and her staff, do an excellent job with the rec park. I do think also that when I came on here, I know there was a great emphasis upon certain entities like GARA being self-sufficient. And in my view, over these years, that's absolutely impractical. And it really just kind of takes away from the vision of what they need to accomplish for the community. It becomes the center of focus, and they're not able to really do their job. At the same time, from a financial standpoint, I think everyone should be aware of that we have increased our contribution in the past and not been met by Cumberland Township. So there is really no reason to expect that Cumberland Township will meet those increases. I wish you your best in making that happen. And the same with capital projects or improvements out there. There's a certain reality that Cumberland Township does not fund this the same way that we do. They collect fees from developers. And someday, probably a long time from now, but when you're talking about a 25-year lease, possibly within that window, development will slow and stop in Cumberland Township. And hopefully, when the day comes, there will be someone out there that'll have the gumption to fund recreation, but I would not count on it. I think this is something we've been facing the entire time that I've been involved and well before that. So just be aware that there's really not necessarily, don't accept this as this document as indicative that there will be a reciprocal action by the township. And unfortunately, as Patty highlighted, Strabane from day one, which was invited to that table and took part in those initial discussions, but the supervisors did not have interest. They developed their own recreation park, which is fine. Unfortunately, in that same window, they were compelled at one point to actually give recreation funds back to a developer for failure to use them within a window of time, which was very unfortunate. So just all things I think to be aware of as we go into this. I do think there's a lot of merit in a 25 or even 50-year lease. The unfortunate reality is this has become the borough and Cumberland Township, and we had hoped that it would be a larger, well, and I shouldn't discount Gettysburg School District participates in the board, but in terms of the actual running of it, and Aaron and I have discussed that it is a little bit unusual in that basically it's a single facility, whereas in a lot of park systems you would have multiple parks. So just all things to be aware of.
I was amused a couple weeks ago. I received an email from someone from Cumberland Township who wanted the former Ready project to be turned into a park. Thought that would behoove us to have another park in the borough, but that's a whole other subject. But it's just amusing. I found it.
Well, and a lot of municipalities, well, I don't know, a lot of cities have a department, Parks and Recreation is part of the government entity itself. We're fortunate to have GARA, but if we didn't, we would be paying
A lot more.
for our own Parks and Recreation department.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Charles touched on it, but I think that when I came on and I pulled budgets back, I think it was routinely in excess of $130,000 a year.
Our budget now is $230,000.
I mean, the budget that they operate on, if you see how they're doing things, they're just incredibly thrifty. And I think the things that we have done the past few years have been helpful.
But in the budget that you're talking about, that did not include everything.
No, because you're right, because the highway department went out there again and again and again to do things.
Correct.
And maybe even paid for a staff person, possibly, or
Yeah.
a lot of their hours. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that's not to be a commentary on your current budget size by any means. But just to be aware that, yeah, that we would probably double what we're spending if we had to do it on our own. So whatever we can do with the township is helpful.
In point 4 here, my memory is jogged when you mentioned the school district. That's kind of an amorphous concept right now because there's no one from the school district on your board, correct?
Ours resigned, and they haven't
Yeah.
appointed another one yet.
So there's a proposal in here to kind of move away from that model and go with half and half plus alternating one. So if the board is 7 people, the borough appoints 3, Cumberland appoints 3, and then for a 4-year term, Cumberland appoints the 4th, and then the subsequent 4-year term, the borough appoints the 4th. So you have a board of 7. If that's even possible to change, I don't know what's the authorized limit, 7? Okay, so 3 and 3 plus 1 alternating back and forth is the concept. Kind of move away from the idea of the school district.
From what I was told, the reason why the school district was added was at one point, very at the beginning, they did a lot with our baseball. We traded off equipment quite often. That's from my understanding why that was added. But
How long has that position been vacant?
I would say almost 6 months.
And who from the district traditionally has held it? Is it a teacher or a athletics?
Last time it was a teacher and a coach. Before that, I think it was,
I think Mike Williams held that at one
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
when he was the AD,
Yes.
athletic director. I mean, I think it accomplished a few goals. It created a scenario where neither municipality was appointing the majority of the board. It may have accomplished things at the time, but also it at least gave the notion that the school district would have some involvement and have some awareness and in what's happening at the park, because it would be great if giving the area that the school district covers, that they have some awareness and involvement there. But I can also appreciate that they have their own demands and facilities. So I don't even know how that would be done. If that's really desired, that's
Might-
something you
might-
have to research.
We would have-
A
we might-
modification to their bylaws.
Yeah, and potentially, and we'd have to look to see whether we need to amend the articles of incorporation of the authority. Because I suspect we had the specific formula regarding appointing the authority board members in those seminal creation documents. Means that the borough, I mean, if that's something that people wanted to do, the borough and Cumberland Township could do that in tandem. There is process and procedure, but
Yeah, so what I'm looking at there with section 4 is I don't think we can include that new language until we review those documents. But I think it would be wise to get this signed at the end of the year.
I'm gonna meet with Cumberland Township over this as well, and then my board in November, and then everything. Yeah,
When's
send it away.
the next meeting for Cumberland?
In November, I believe it's the 3rd.
They've already met this month?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess 2 items we need input on from the council are the financial contributions, because the agreement here does envision essentially locking that in for a 10-year period, and then also the length of the lease.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there a reason why we're only doing 10? Is it too late to alter this now and make it longer?
Do you mean financially?
Well, yeah, the
Well,
MOU is
the
different than the
lease.
lease.
Thank you.
Yep,
Yeah,
the
I
lease,
think the-
MOU is easy to amend with shorter durations. The lease is what really locks in the legal mechanism for sustainability of the park.
have you, has there been any, when you've applied for grants, any indication of what type of length of time period that they would be looking for? Obviously, longer is better.
Yeah, they always ask for the lease, and they want to see that. So that is a big indicator that, how long are you gonna hold this property? And like Charles said, the longer they see that, they see a lease that says 50 years, especially grants like DCNR, that's gonna be there. So
50 years is the longest period of time that an authority can be essentially, I mean, I believe the initial incorporation was for 50 years. That's the longest period of time you can incorporate an authority. You can renew that and continue to extend that. And I would assume that would be something that we looked at. But again, there is the concept on the law too about current councils binding future councils for too long of a period of time. It would be, I mean, my recommendation, without looking at it more closely, because certain things, when you start pushing 30 years, become considered actually getting close to being a more of a permanent transfer of real estate under state law. So I would think 25 years would probably be the maximum, and that's definitely within. It's like 29 or 30-year leases that start getting to that point. You certainly wouldn't want to extend it anyway longer than the life of the authority, which I'm guessing now is 40 years, but I would think 25 would probably be a pretty safe call.
Support for a 25-year lease?
Isn't there something though in the lease that you can
Renew it.
end it early?
There is, I think, a clause in there that if
Yeah.
someone wants
Right.
out,
Every lease has an
Every lease
escape
has,
clause.
correct.
So then, if future councils want to get rid of it or change it, they have the authority to do so. But if we can get more or better grants with a longer lease, then why not?
Go with it.
Go with it, because future councils can change it if they want to, or can get out of it if they want to.
Yeah, and it's, the 25 years is based on other laws that are in place with regards to realty transfer taxes, that sort of thing, and recordation requirements.
Okay, 25 years, okay? All right, let's do 25 years. And the financial element, is everyone okay with, for this coming year, it'll be 77,500, and then with a 2.5%, pardon me, 2% increase per year. That's how that's set up. Okay?
I have just a comment about this past Saturday. The joint was jumping. Good grief, Saturday morning. Thank goodness for the hospital parking, because they needed that. But what it created was families with young children darting across the street to get from the hospital parking lot to the market. And someone approached me about a crosswalk. Once the market is done for the season, that isn't going to be an issue. People wouldn't be needing to cross there. So I'm not certain that would be something we would want to look into. But I have a question about the Saturday mornings. The success of that market,
They do have traffic
what
signals
does
we
it
could
do
use
to
all
the
summer
Sterner
long.
building? Is it burdensome to the Sterner building
There
to
at
have that
Getty Street
traffic?
and Ball.
not really. A lot of our Saturday rentals, and we discussed this when we met with Reza at the very beginning, most of our Saturday rentals were after, in the afternoon or evening. So it worked out really well that with them being there. And he was really understanding if someone wanted to come in a little early, he let them in. We worked around, we got things, we have gates that we opened and we got people back there safely. So we were able to make it work this year. And we're gonna plan on smoother transitions and doing that again next year. And for this Saturday, we had a trick or treat trail, and we didn't think it was gonna be that popular. And it was way bigger than we thought. I had 300 pieces of candy and I was out by 11. So, so that's why it was went a lot better than we thought we did.
Gotcha. All right, so everybody's good with the financial component? All right, Aaron, thank you. We are good.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that takes us on to a civil service regulations amendment. So this is something that came to light within the civil service manual, and I'm not entirely certain why this was drafted this way. But when we deal with applicants in the civil service manual at current, it specifies that the applicant or applicants for promotion and whatnot, that they have to have an operator's license issued by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the chief had come to us and requested that it simply say an operator's license.
Right.
Because especially as we talk about widening our applicant pool, and I can tell you that I didn't realize it said this, because certainly when the chief himself applied for his position, he had an operator's license from Colorado. So I'm not sure exactly why it's there. It's not really being followed, and we should adjust the language so that it's accurate, because we've had applicants from out of state otherwise.
Yeah, I think when we discussed this, when it first came up, we assumed that the original intent was to make sure somebody had a valid driver's license. And that the wording just sort of, kind of flowed, and somebody said a valid Pennsylvania driver's license. We're sort of doubtful that the original intent was to exclude out-of-state applicants. I mean, especially where we are, the idea that somebody might live just across the Maryland border.
Wes, we talked about this.
Yep.
It's a valid operator's license.
Yep, so that's what we're just talking about, removing the Pennsylvania portion. I think this will be pretty clear. Matt's just clarifying it. Yeah. We're not aware of any intent to exclude somebody that's a stone's throw over the line, or candidly, I think we had an applicant this past time from either North or South Carolina. So.
Well, I think we all agreed on that.
Yep, I agree so. So is everyone okay if we'll have a motion to accept the Civil Services recommendation and on our November agenda to adjust their rules and regulations? So this just says operator's license. Yeah, okay. That seems appropriate.
It has to be valid, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, yeah, valid, yes.
I mean, it's my humor. Anyway, valid,
Gotcha.
yes.
Doesn't communicate as well by phone. Yeah, transfer as well. Okay, so yeah, we'll ensure they have a valid operator's license, but it could be from any of the states. All right.
Well, and one other thing, and
Or
maybe
territories.
I'm going to be a stickler. It has to be in the United States. Or if you don't agree, then you don't agree. Didn't think about that one. Anyway.
I think
what
if we
you
get to
guys
that
want
problem,
to do.
I'll push Harry to dealing with that, but
Okay, thank you.
I guess you never know. But okay. So this evening, that takes us on to the budget. The chief was unable to be with us this evening, so we do have a few items left in Department 410, the police services, to deal with, but we will visit those items next Monday, October 30. So this evening, we will be starting in Department 411.
Okay.
Which deals with fire protection. Starts with.
I'm sorry, are we on expense or revenue?
We're in expenses. We're in Fund 1, Department 411 Fire, and it starts with item 110. And make sure I have up. And I'm going to be using the document I'm looking at, Charles, is the document you had there. That's 2024 budget proposal, all funds consolidated detail. That seemed fair. It's the one that's kind of the main budget folder there, if that works.
We're on page 1. We're on page 60 of that document.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. So if you're looking at the PDF, 2024 budget proposal, all funds consolidated detail, and page 60 is where 411 starts. So you have a few items there. It's a relatively small department. The salary there deals with the department's business manager, which the fire department, you'll see on the revenue side, reimburses us for. The salary, taxes, and benefits that are related. Workers' compensation is listed there. That is an item that you could contest with the township. Good luck with that, but by law, the township should be contributing to that, and to my knowledge, they never have, ever. And it increased substantially probably about 4 or 5 years ago because of legislation, I believe, involving cancer risks and things of that nature. And then there are a few items that deal with electricity. I'm gonna struggle which electricity that is.
Should be fire sirens.
$300.
Okay. Which is just only operated for
Well, they each have.
now for tornadoes.
Yeah, it's an EMA if it is
Yeah,
needed.
yeah, they don't operate it for.
But yeah, they have their own meters.
So they have their own meters, so that's what that is. So that's for the sirens if they were needed for an
Siren.
emergency.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
Sirens.
Which I tell you what, should make sure that those are checked upon, because they're not operated nearly as often. And if you had an EMA need, that's something we should keep account on. I know that some places have taken them out of service entirely, but that's really kind of a public service in an urban setting like this. Hydrant services pay the municipal authority. They maintain the hydrants and flush them and so forth. And then the last item you have there is your fireman's relief, or fire relief as it's now called there. So that's a pass-through. That's a revenue item on the other side, paid for from what they call foreign fire insurance premiums, which just means you're buying your insurance from a company out of state. So any questions from 411? Relatively straightforward. All right, 413. Ms. Marshall, shall we talk about code enforcement?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's.
So we're actually reducing our ask this year. Contracted services, that refers to PMCA. They do still do some enforcement, largely with vacation rentals that are operating without UNO. It doesn't fall under, it still falls under UCC. So they're the building code official, they're the ones who enforce that. They do some stop work orders generally though, they're for UCC related stop work, so the fee for that is covered by the charge to whoever got the work order, but every once in a while, I think last week we had one where Pete wasn't available and we had work in the historic district without a permit, and so they came in and issued the stop work order for that. So they do fill in for things like that. Last year we budgeted, we're asking about half of what we budgeted for last year. Our reliance on PMCA is going down, and we're seem to be catching up a little bit with the vacation rentals. And so as long as we don't see any major increases in those, I think we can stay within our ask.
And they're still doing a lot of work, but it's funded by the property owners when they pay for their permits.
Right.
To
so,
PMCA.
Yes, PMCA is our building code official. They Clem a lot as our building code official. Anything relating to uniform construction code, permitting inspections, that all goes through them, but they charge fees for services for the majority of it. And so it's paid for by the permit fee, by the inspection fee.
Okay.
Any questions on any of the, it's pretty much the same as it was last year. There's a little bit less for continuing ed, just based on usage.
I'm gonna talk about going to the tablet with the, going to the tablet there under 413-252, so they can do field work.
Yes. Oh, yes. So right now we're using a handheld. We are looking to transition to a tablet and a field printer. So that'll get everything kind of in one place, so that we're not operating on two different systems.
Okay.
Does that have its own data contract as well?
Or is it just listed as one of the?
It would be, would that be in our cell phone, like a cellular contract?
I mean, I see his phone broken out. Do we need to break out that service as well?
I'll have to double check that. Do you know the answer to that?
It would be through Verizon. I don't know what you were looking at, the pricing, that was going to be phone on that together.
Yeah, we just want to see if they charge an additional fee per the device and make sure we have that accounted for. That's all. So yeah, your software is relatively stagnant from 23. I'm assuming that none of our contracts have increased related to that. Eco 360, things of that nature. And the contracted IT is based on the overall quote from Trista, correct? Trista.
Yeah, everything that's
Like,
in
we have a
here
much
was
larger-
directly from a quote from Tracy.
Yeah, we
yes.
have a quote for everything, and that's
Right.
just that chunk of it, which is 413,452. 413,460 is relatively a little lower, relatively status quo for continuing ed. And then this envisions splitting the parking vehicle with code enforcement.
Right. Which we do use now for code enforcement. So, large weather permitting, Pete uses the bike or he goes out on foot. There's times where he needs to get someplace sooner for expedience or weather-based, or there's, yeah, it's usually weather or speed that dictates whether or not he uses the parking vehicle.
And you all just coordinate that, and that's
Yeah.
fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions about that or anything else in 413, code enforcement? All right, that takes us to planning.
So planning is also very similar from last year. You'll see 414,135, we still have contracted services. Last year we budgeted the full amount for the contract for Michael Baker International for the rezoning. We obviously haven't completed that, and so we, estimated a month or so ago, based on the invoices that we'd received, what we would want to budget for next year to make sure that we could finish out that contract. So that's why there's contracted services under planning.
Okay.
A lot of the rest is vacation, benefits, and then when you go to 414,210, gets back to operating supplies. The request this year is slightly lower than last year. Same, we do, we are asking for more input. We're going over in postage. Postage rates went up, so we need to
Right.
account for that. Same on miscellaneous expenses, very similar on computer engineering. Reduction in additional services for engineering, we really haven't, other than ordinance reviews, we really haven't had high engineering fee, like other, significant additional engineering fees, so we reduced the request for other engineering services. Legal services the same, zoning hearing board slightly more to account for more activity recently, just based on trends. Ordinance reviews same as last year. And then it gets to telephone, internet, things like that that are pretty fixed. And then just based on use, reduction in travel, very slight reduction in travel reimbursement, legal advertising, that's based on what we've been using, using subscriptions, and continuing ed is all based on kind of what we typically have been using. Slight reduction from last year.
All right. Are there questions in Department 414 planning?
I think I actually glazed over, we do envision an intern for next year too, and we budgeted for that.
I did notice that, but
Yeah.
that's a consistent number from the past. So that gives us the ability to leverage funds probably more efficiently if we're able to find someone.
I think it'll be really helpful in the transition too. So I think that'll be a helpful position to have available.
It's true. Okay, if there's nothing else in 414, 415 is emergency management. Basically the department of Dave Sanders, which is actually why it's constructed the way it is, because civil service testing doesn't have a direct connection to emergency management, but it all fits in.
Right.
But there's really no surprises there. 3 items. Any questions about 415? 421 takes us to the Department of Health. 2 items, recycling initiatives and the allocation for TNR. And my assumption is that the TNR allocation is lighter due to lack of utilization. Okay. So I do think that that's been a very successful program. We've had a lot of feedback from the residents that they appreciate that. And if they ever had an issue, they could certainly come to the council and ask for a little bit more money, but they use it very efficiently.
Yeah, I do want to note that we've had a lot of really great help from volunteers and residents on that too, that have made that very successful. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
We had talked about hazardous waste.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to consider anything next year, or are you going to consider anything next year since I won't be here?
Well, I think the biggest thing with that is that at the first part, we would need to determine who we would have as potential vendors for such a service.
We need who, how, and what. We need all 3.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the how we have a model for, and how we conduct electronics recycling. I think the what is a big part of the problem, though. That's a very good one, because as we looked at those lists of things, it's going to be difficult. Right, when we write a waste contract, which includes recycling, we can be pretty specific, and then we get our bids for that. The more items that you add to it, the likelihood increases that you're not going to have as many bids. People they can't do it or won't do it. So I think it's something that the council does need to consider how they're going to address, because it's just going to continue to grow, much as the electronics issue did.
Well, and I still contend that I think this is something the county should undertake, but we all know where that's going to fall. And I mean, in the one property I own, there's still 2 boxes of stuff, of which some I'm not sure what it is.
Yep.
Been there a long time. I could have easily been dumping 1 jug of that into the regular garbage, but we haven't done that. But I know that other people do, because they get tired of it being there. I've had people call me, and the problem is they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And we don't have a good answer.
We don't have
That's
an
the
answer.
problem. When
Right.
someone calls, then you're like, well, I too
Right.
have a jug of, whatever it happens to be in the garage or the basement or wherever.
Yeah, we just haven't had a chance to put together the mechanics of a program for this yet.
It's a shame that there is no legitimate transfer station in this county.
Right.
Because I think the closest you do is you run over to Franklin County and
Yeah, Washington Township.
Washington Township and take care of it there.
And I'm
This
not
is
sure
going to be a
what
lot
they
more.
take.
Yeah.
This will be more intensive and involved than shredding event or
Well,
recycling.
no doubt,
Oh, yeah.
no doubt.
This is a whole different animal.
Because, I
There'd
mean,
have to be inspections of everything.
Well, and the people, whoever's doing this, like part of the limitation of finding a vendor is that this is very skilled work. It's very hazardous work.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as, we're going to drop off the computer
Right.
or whatnot. You're talking about receiving things that, well, not everybody receives all things too. And that we see that even with hazmat cleanup scenarios.
yeah. I just don't want to see it get lost in the process. I think it's something that has to
Still
stay
sitting on my desk.
Well, and I appreciate that.
It is. Judy's done some homework on this, so I do have it. I just haven't had a chance to pull Robbie aside and put it together.
The main issue is who would take that which we collected. I see the collection of it being easy. We're practiced, and our customers out there are practiced. But who would take the stuff? That's where the research really has to go in. And how will they take it? I can remember Vicki Redmond of the county telling me that on the first time that they did it, in her car were open cans of paint. On her lap as she's driving away was an open can of paint. So that part of it has to be smoothed out.
Yeah, and there could be things that are significantly more hazardous. I mean,
But if we do it, I stand ready to be the telephone number that people can call to sign up. And I still think our sign-up system is better than any of the willy-nilly non-sign-up systems that other people use. If I get hit by a bus, I don't know who's going to do it for you because the staff doesn't have the time. I nominate Robbie back there, but
Don't get hit by a bus.
and Warren Blade may be an appropriate phone call at the county. He's the EMA director, to see who they're using for response, because my understanding is that landscape has changed also. That there may not be private entities in the South Central area that are still doing that. Or it may be very limited. I understand that, like Letterkenny's coming off base to do things. So I'd be curious to see who's actually out there. Okay, so a future priority there probably, which would probably appear there in health, I would think. All right, any other questions on health? 421. That takes us to 430, which is Public Works. All right, now this budget envisions status quo staffing, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that gives us a director, foreman, 5 laborers. I believe that's correct. That's correct.
One of which is a mechanic.
And then some part-time. Yeah, I was to say, that's what I was looking at. I'm looking at the mechanics. And there are some things that appear here in the following pages that deal with differential pay and things of that nature that are a result of the collective bargaining agreement. Some of these are additions or changes over the past several years and just how we account for things. But I think that in the past experience that you see on your chart, as well as in what's budgeted, that Mr. Harbaugh is pretty efficient with how he utilizes your public works staff. So, I mean, the personnel items run the whole way through. Still in them.
Are we, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want the public to know the answer. Are we back to the number of staff for Public Works that we were in 2019?
Yeah. 2019, yeah.
So I think the answer is yes, because, but that's a valid question to bring up, because
So
public.
we're just now back to where we were.
Because Public Works, well, and yeah, and then this is also, it's kind of like sometimes the way the police department functions too. Authorized budgeted staff versus who's actually working. And I know that, there have been some challenges over the past few years with that, because we're a public employer. The salaries or pay rates don't look as attractive, and not every person that is applying for a job of that nature can appreciate the benefits package that comes with. So I know that Robbie's had some people in and out, but this envisions, yeah, budgeted, full-staffed, or I shouldn't say full-staffed, back to 2019 levels, because I'm sure John could argue about what full staff would mean.
While other departments were adding, we were not adding public works.
No, and that was the first, that was the department that really, like a lot of the pandemic problems were balanced on the back of Public Works.
Thank you.
As always.
I just wanted to make sure that that was highlighted.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So your personnel lines go the whole way through 430,199. That's the last personnel line, which is the dental insurance component. And then it starts going into operating supplies. And I guess as I'm looking at this, I'm wondering if there's anything, Mr. Harbaugh, if there's anything you want to highlight. I see there's relatively, most things are pretty static, relatively so.
No, I mean, the parts, the vehicle parts maintenance and the equipment maintenance is ongoing issues that we have to take care of for maintenance on our equipment. We do have, are looking for the equipment. We are looking to purchase a set of backhoe tires next year, and a set of skid loader tires. So that's why that item is where it is this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it doesn't look, you're looking at 432.51, right?
Yeah, and well,
yeah, it's not really that far out of line with.
Yeah, the equipment maintenance is 374, but you're not there yet.
Okay, all right. Let's say I'm like, yeah, say 251 looks pretty much the same or a little bit lower.
Is there a reason your fuel costs are projected to be lower?
That was my question. And I assume it says gasoline, but that's gasoline and diesel?
Yes.
And
it's 432.31.
Diesel is now up over $5 a gallon, $5.25 to $5.50, depending where you're at. So I don't understand how we lowered that.
I don't have an answer for that. Now that we took an average is what we did for the past
Let's say so you
couple
looked
years.
at
What's the object number on that again?
432.31. So what you did was you looked at showing 21 year end at 14,000. So if you go
21,000 this year.
Yeah, if you go back to 2020, it was only 9,000. So yeah, I think we probably want to use some caution with that, because in 2020, one of the things is we had fewer people working for us.
So
Even 17 though was pretty low.
through today, we've only used 65% of that line item for this year.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of that, when I look at different years, I almost wonder if it's, how often do we buy fuel, roughly?
About once a month.
It's about once a month, because there are some years where it's really, it just really sometimes goes up and down. There are years that's 15,000, years it's closer to 10.
Well,
Year where
snow
it's
and ice will
25.
Snow and ice
yeah.
will play into that
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it really, okay, without, say
If
that,
you have
that's,
if you have a
Yeah,
really
we-
mild winter, as opposed to like 1996 when it was just the opposite.
right.
I mean, in '96, we had to call and get special deliveries because we were running through fuel. Those days we haven't seen for a while, but,
I know when you haul snow, it takes a lot more fuel too.
yeah.
Oh, hauling it out of town. So I think that's a valid point that, you know, we will look at 432.31 and probably at least return it where it was.
I
maybe
would
a
think
little
so. I
higher.
mean, I'm doing some transports and, I know we get a better price on fuel here because we're not paying all the road taxes that I pay in my transport business, but, wow.
Boost that a little bit.
I think you ought to go up to at least where you're projecting this year to end.
Okay.
It's kind of a dart in a dartboard situation, really, because you can't predict the weather, which does play. You get a bad winter, you're going to burn through fuel. Just no question about that. You get a mild winter like we've been having, you might be okay. Depends on how many streets you're going to rebuild, is how much hauling you plan to do. I mean, there's a lot of things that come into the fuel usage in the highway department.
Right.
Alright, so we'll increase 430, 231 a bit. So it looks like we're also looking to implement some tablets there in Public Works at 430, 252. Making some things electronic that are currently paper. Uh, 430, 313, engineering and architectural. What is that cover in this proposal?
Charles, I don't have an answer for that. Is that for the new building?
What is that dollar amount?
8,000?
Yeah, so all that would cover would be planning for a potential new building.
Did any of that happen this year?
We've gotten very little done with that this year. We made some progress, but I think we budgeted around 10,000 for this year, and I'm not sure that we spent more than half of that. So I know we didn't make nearly the amount of progress as we were hoping for. There was 2 parcels we were looking at, including the Inskip one potentially, and that's we know that that's not an option anymore, so we had to pivot. So yeah, we're not as far advanced with that as we would like. So I guess some of this year's budget that we didn't use, we're looking to potentially use next year.
To continue that work.
Year to date, just under 5,000's been used in that line item. It was budgeted for 10.
Right. So that's why it's just under 10, shooting for an $8,000 line item next year.
Okay. So we're still looking at options with the public works shed, and just some money to explore really what our options are. Then you have all the telephone and internet, which I assume these are all drilled down from the fees you have. Yeah. Software, it's very similar. Advertising, our insurance rates are what they are. We have shopped those probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I remember, Charles, last time we did insurance overall. Maybe not that long.
It was pre-COVID.
Was it?
Yeah.
I remember doing that. Have your utilities. Which looks like either the same or modest increases. Repair and maintenance of the building. Status quo. $5,500. That's sum at 430,373. $430,374. I think, is that what you were alluding to earlier there, Mr. Harbaugh?
Mm-hmm.
So you have some specific items that are targeted there with that 15,000.
Yes.
Certainly want to maintain the generator. We know how expensive it is to deal with one that's broken. So
You said about replacing backhoe tires, are they still in state contract, or have they stayed relative the same because truck tires have gone up?
So that, yes, the backhoe tires are still on state contract. Yeah, but the truck tires, yeah, those prices have gone outrageous.
Yeah, I know.
All right, kind of moving on to the next page, continuing education. It's up just slightly, but this deals with just making sure that our employees have what they need in terms of covering the basics in Con Ed. Your CDL, drug and alcohol testing.
That goes up precipitously.
Is that, are we having like a vendor issue there? Do you know, Charles or Robbie? Or
What was the question?
430, 470. Our drug and alcohol testing's up
More
pretty
than double.
substantially.
So are we paying more for that now?
I think the rates did go up, but I think you have more people in your department now.
We do.
And
So year-to-date, we've spent, yeah, we've gone, so last year was budgeted at 750. Year-to-date, we're at 2,100.
Okay. Yeah, I can see some years in the past where we were up around or over 1,000.
Those requirements changed too, didn't they?
yes, they have. Yes.
So you're getting hit with testing more often than.
More often, yes.
So that's why.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. We're not getting a dramatic increase in rate, it's the frequency. Enterprise fleet management there, so you can see the vehicles that are associated with that. And that is the last item in Department 430, I believe. Correct. Okay, that takes us on to street lighting, which is 434.
Has Med-Ed talked to us about any programs to change out from the sodium vapor to, or the high pressure to LEDs?
Yes. So this year, we had 43 that are eligible to be replaced out to LED. They have it went to their engineers to get back to us to replace the ones that are eligible for this year. The next line of eligible ones won't come till 2024.
What makes them eligible?
So the high pressure sodium, when they were put in, their lifespan was 15 years, maybe.
Okay.
10 or 15 years. So they were all changed out in 1 year. I shouldn't say they were all changed out in 1 year. The majority of them were changed out in 1 year, so that's why 2023 and 2024, or actually 2024, there will be a big majority of them that are going to be eligible to be changed out. If we change them out early, we're going to have to pay extra money.
Of course.
Yeah.
Do you know a percentage of how many have been converted at this point?
I'm going to say the ones that will be, because this is the first year that we're eligible to start changing them. And so our percentage this year is probably 12%.
Total?
Yeah, next year it'll be a lot, the percentage will be a lot higher. I mean, probably almost 50% to 75%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's just because of they were all installed almost at the same time.
Yeah, there's a total of, I believe, 634 of them in town.
Okay.
And out of those 634, 12% of them are eligible this year, which we already have an agreement with them to change them out to LEDs. And next year, 2024, be another 50%, 75% possibly.
Wow.
Till they're all changed out, it'll probably be 2026 or 2027 into LEDs.
And the 600 that he's talking about are only what Med Ed owns.
Right.
Yeah.
All the ornamental streetlights we own.
Right. And those are already changed out to LEDs.
Do we expect Med Ed to change our fee per light when they lessen their energy consumption?
I have not heard, have you heard anything from Hudson about
I've
that?
not heard any increase. I mean, maybe next year when the contract comes up for renewal.
Just curious, right? Because that's something for the public to know. Like, we pay for those. They're not metered. We pay for
Right.
them whether they work or not.
The flat
so
rate.
If you see a street light out, please let
Right.
Mr. Harbaugh know. You can let Med Ed know. And if you want to get the poll number, then let him know if you can. Because we're going to pay for it anyway.
Right.
And those are not attached to buildings, they're actually on poles.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
If it's attached to the building, then it's the property owner's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, it's sometimes
Because, like,
surprising.
there's a
when
lot
they
of alleys and things that have some very large lights when they work,
Right.
that are attached to a building.
Yeah, they're
Those
not
are
private.
similar to the street light.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of dusted dawns that you'll see in the alleys that are private. They're not, it's not on a Med Ed pole. It's not Med Ed light.
Okay. 435 sidewalks and crosswalks. You said vision of specific, anything specific, Charles, or?
That's not revenue.
Or Robbie, or whomever.
8 random squares inside one.
Which one, 430?
435, whole department 435, sidewalks and crosswalks. There's only 2 items. They're engineering and repair and maintenance. 313 and 372. And it's the same number that was there last year. But I didn't know if we had a handle on.
We're about 50% spent in both categories.
I didn't know if there were specific crosswalks we were looking at next year that we were dealing with. Sometimes there are.
No specific ones that I know of. It's just general maintenance,
So that's
like truncated domes and stuff like that.
truncated domes, line painting, things like that. Okay. Questions on 435? 438 bridges. And this is just Fund 1 that's showing. Are there items under capital too, Charles?
Well, that's why I was going through each department, not by fund. There will be expenses in Fund 18.
I'm sorry if I got you off track here. I'm trying to use the document that we were provided with.
There are going to be other expenses in Fund 18 for bridges.
If I ever do something like that, you need to let me know. Because I'm looking at what we have. I'm not sure what else I would have started with. Document one, sorry.
Matt and I had a very long discussion about this earlier today.
Okay. I'm like, there are a lot of documents here.
It goes back to what version of information do you want to look at this? It's all the same information, it's just all formatted differently. And so some people are looking at different versions of the same information, so.
So what you're telling me is, we're gonna finish
Get
Fund
back to
1.
this in Fund 18. Yes.
We're gonna finish Fund 1, and then we're gonna come back and look at Fund 18.
Right.
Okay. So things like bridges, 438 look small because that's basically the minimum. And you'll see that again in Fund 18, which is capital projects, I assume. Correct. Sound right? I don't always remember them. All right. 439 deals with your roads and alleys. You see noted there in 439, 313, traffic studies on 5 selected intersections where we have public safety concerns raised. That item is higher than it has been in the past. That would set up possible improvements in those areas. And yes.
North Stratton and Lincoln Avenue, is that one of them? Is that one of the 5?
Have we chosen the 5?
So we haven't necessarily chosen the spots. The idea was this came up whenever we were talking about the Hanover Street,
Right.
4th Street intersection. And the idea is if we're going to be looking at this, we should look at up to 5 of our top issues. I don't remember the North Stratton Street one being one of those. It was a list that the chief had with accidents. He rattled it off at the meeting when we were talking about. I don't remember Stratton being there, but I think back to the point is I don't know that the intersections that we need to study have been identified yet. So I think that's still open for discussion.
Stratton and Lincoln definitely have sightline issues, especially
Okay.
with the rental properties that are in there and the way the parking is.
Stratton,
Always
right.
have.
Yeah, I think that's open for discussion. So if
Okay.
if you guys have an opinion on which ones,
Well, put that on the list. I won't be part of that discussion.
10-4.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Yeah, and it always has
I
been.
mean,
Yeah.
because you've got the old Harrisburg Road coming around the curve,
Right.
while you're sitting at the stop sign trying to look through this tree that needs horribly trimmed to your left, and, you know, you're trying to, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
you're trying to
about-
look through cars. That doesn't
North
work
Stratton,
well.
Yeah, North Stratton,
Doesn't
Stratton
no
and Lincoln.
vision through cars.
and, yeah, and, 4th and,
East Lincoln.
4th and Hanover.
Yeah, so it
Right.
sounds like that's allocating money for the whatever's selected then. So when this comes up, that there's money in the budget to do it.
Yeah, no, and I'm just thinking there's also an effort with the Ready site. They're going to be studying all of the intersections on Stratton Street as well, but that's more about traffic counting than it is about sight distance, what you guys are talking about. So it's kind of 2 different things there, but I got a note here for it.
Yeah, and there haven't been a lot of accidents, to my knowledge, at Lincoln and Stratton, but as Chad was saying, as the bushes grow and nobody trims, sight distance has gotten smaller. And so we can't, I'm not saying that the list the chief gave you with traffic accidents shouldn't count, but they shouldn't be the only intersections that are looked at, because we have some with other problems.
Agree.
Right, and my concern from several constituents from 4th and Hanover isn't necessarily, it is the accidents, but it's also the speed, the slowing down. There wasn't an accident, but pedestrians almost got hit.
Yeah, I think
Luckily, there wasn't an accident, but pedestrians almost got hit walking their dog.
I think it's any time that, whether you're,
So it needs to be looked at for sure.
yeah, everybody, I think we kind of have a good appreciation of most of the intersections in town. When you drive up that cross street in your vehicle, and you kind of just know that you're kind of taking your chances, or if you approach it as a pedestrian and you think to yourself, I need to make sure that I get across here really quickly, you know, and Hanover Street, almost all the intersections basically qualify for that treatment.
And there's a crosswalk there. But they
Oh,
have
yeah,
to
no.
speed across, because those cars are not slowing down.
Yeah, no, I remember
Yeah.
door to door in that neighborhood, you want to go down one side and back up the other.
They're trying to get out there.
I see. All right. Do you know which alleys we envision? I'm assuming that 439, 377, that we have some alleys in mind.
So yes.
I know there's always a need.
So with the motion, or with the transferring of money, those 2 alleys were Legion Alley and Gillian Alley. Next year's proposed alleys is going to be Weaver Alley and part of Wall Alley.
Okay. Any questions there under 439 roads and alleys? Again, this is not the big bite at some of these things. All right, that takes us to 445 parking. And I believe that this envisions the current staffing that we have,
Yes.
which I know we've had some challenges getting part-time help, am I correct?
Correct.
So this envisions the one part-time employee that we have. So that's the only, that's one thing that does kind of stick out. It's a kind of a significant drop in expense that maybe we want to be conscious of.
Are we gonna try to hire another one?
You know, that's kind of my question here is, I know that we've not been successful, but at the same time, you know, we're not adding full-time staff, it certainly doesn't look like, and we're reducing part-time, so would it be wise to budget for a second position and in the hope that you find somebody? I kind of think that it would be.
So, do you want to take that back up to the 35?
Feedback?
I would love to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think that you have to, you know, I think that it's the responsibility as a council to ensure that the funds are there to use. I can understand the limitations and difficulties in hiring, but I don't think that's a reason to give up in a budget process. I think that you have to, you know, you're gonna make the attempt and hope that you get somebody that can work for you.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can't and you come back, I mean, I don't, I could be wrong, but I don't think that I've ever looked at this, and I don't think most of our council ever looks at the budget in ways that some entities do, where if you don't spend it, then it just disappears. Like, we understand that sometimes you can't get people. And so I would hope that when you're looking at 2025, people keep that in mind when that comes. So yeah, I would take 445, 115, you know, right up back to roughly where it was at 35,000, that ballpark. If you're using some sort of, you know, more complex formula to figure that, that's fine.
What is that part-time wage?
$15.08 an hour.
And is that contractually derived?
Yes.
It's 85% of the starting wage for that year.
Got it. Thank you.
So if you want a job, like part-time parking enforcement, we'd like to hear from you. All right, so 445, 116 through, yeah, it's kind of like other departments, through about 190, nope, not quite.
199.
199 is all personnel. So, I mean, the one change through a lot of the departments that you notice, I hope everybody's noticed, is that with the change of the insurance, the HRA, right, that's a big chunk. That impacts every single department based upon how many members of that department there are. Likewise with the pension contribution, because we want to make sure the pension's fully funded. We discussed that in prior departments, but it applies uniformly across.
And it looks like there's one or two lines that would be affected if we did have another part-timer on there, like unemployment would have another, unemployment compensation would have another expense.
Usually there's small chunks for FICA, and several of those items you'll see a little impact with. It's kind of proportional. So 445, 210 is the first time we get into non-employee related items. Ms. Fissel, are there items here that you'd like to highlight?
Not in 210, I don't believe.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking through, I'm kind of going down through the department looking for anything that's sort of out of place. I know that a lot of it is on that page there, you know, a lot of those next items are all things that we have to deal with, you know, telephone lines and internet and so forth.
The 220, I know That fluctuates a lot, and most of it, that's, we use that for refunds.
Right.
A lot of the times, people will get tickets, they paid with pay by phone, they paid the wrong license plate number, and then they paid their ticket
Yeah, I see
before
those
they
situations.
called me. So they paid both, so we refund their ticket fee.
Yeah, I've seen those come through.
So, or we had a handicap one, so that was $100 refund because they forgot to hang their placard.
We'll have people sometimes that make errors and pay twice. Because they realize they made the mistake and then they don't want to get a ticket, but then it's, we try to do right by them.
So the ticket refunds, I believe, were a little higher this year than they had been in the past, but it just fluctuates depending on the year.
Just how things happen, yeah. But software, I'm looking at 445, 329, that looks pretty consistent. Some slight increases probably because of the cost of just doing business. All your insurances, utilities for the garage. Maintenance, 445, 373 does envision painting the parking meter bases. Repair, we have a credit card fee. Dues and subscriptions. What are you looking at? All the contracted IT.
No, the fees on
Yeah, the
391.
Yeah, the credit card merchant fee. Yeah, so it's a 30 cent per transaction. If we were to absorb that fee, the estimate is it would cost us $200,000 a year. Is that right?
That's actually a 35-cent transaction fee, not 30 cents.
Not 30 cents.
It's 35 cents.
But the merchant fee there is just for us to have the ability to do that. It's 26 grand. Right, your contracted IT, this is the breakdown from Trista. Your Con Ed, capital purchases, which is your vehicles. Those vehicles already exist. And your minor machine. I guess overall, are there questions for parking 445? All right, that takes us to 454, Parks and Rec. Which in this budget, again, because Aaron was here earlier, the big item is the contribution to GARA. All the other items are basically insurances and the stormwater fee. So, everybody okay with our contribution to the Recreation Authority that we've budgeted? 77.5. $454,550, the appropriation for special events. Charles, you want to speak to that? This was, I think something you created last year, or the year before, possibly.
Yeah, so these are more high-profile events that serves the broader community at large as opposed to a specific special interest. So essentially, the concept here is the municipality becomes a sponsor of these events. And of course, this helps to offset the invoice that these event sponsors ultimately receive as well.
Everybody okay with 454?
Yes.
Parks and Rec.
And I'll just note for the public, as you look at this, while these event coordinators really do appreciate this contribution, it is very small. as far as the total of what these event coordinators have to produce and raise to create said events for our borough, in our borough. For example, the New Year's Eve celebration is well over 15K just to produce in this borough.
And so is tomorrow's Halloween parade, just so everyone knows.
Very popular events.
They're moving in and close to 20,000 for tomorrow's parade right now.
Gettysburg Pride is easily 20K a year for one day. All these events that bring lots of people to town, not just Gettysburg residents. We know that our Halloween parade and our New Year's celebration, people come from many municipalities within our county. Everybody wants to enjoy Gettysburg, but just so everybody knows, someone is paying for those wonderful events. So thank you, Borough of Gettysburg, for the contribution, and to the taxpayers, please know that it is a very important, though small, contribution to our very important events that happen.
Okay, we go with 454. All right, 455, Shade Tree.
Chad's
Do you want to talk about this now? We can. It's going to be on involving Shade Tree and the relationship with the ordinance, and Shade Tree and the Borough Council will be an item of conversation in our November work session. And I did speak to Susan Noggle, who's on the commission, on September 30th. And she said that she would prepare a one-page explanation to share with me that I could share with you, and we could all get ourselves on the same page. Now, anybody at home that's wondering why this just elicited this kind of reaction, is since that conversation, and I did not realize that this was happening, shade trees were planted. And I know that not all the property owners knew and or appreciated said planting. And I will apologize to those folks because I didn't have an indication that that was happening. And if I did, it's just happening on that timeline, and if I did, I missed it.
So should we wait then, since we're going to be talking about it later then, maybe?
We're going to have it in the budget. We could always adjust the budget,
Okay.
but I mean, the reality is that it's a very small number of line items. If we cannot come to some sort of amicable resolution to our shade tree scenario, we could adjust it.
No, it's a very small line item. I don't have an issue with the number.
It's the
I have an issue with
operation.
the process.
Right. Yeah, no, I was kind of astounded.
Yeah.
But when
So-
when I had a conversation, and in that conversation, they're talking about discussion about how it's nice to get that the property owners are watering them. That's nice. But then I found out in the same conversation that the property owners weren't being notified until they were put in. And I said, well, that's why you're not getting help watering them. There's no way. No offense to Mark Geis, I like Mark Geis. There's no way I'm going to pay Mark down at GMA to run water all summer to water a tree that I didn't want.
Right.
Yeah, so
And that's like the mildest step that I can take on that one. Because I tell you, there's no way.
And believe me, I know things change. Things have really changed in this subject from when it was new and I was involved with it, but $20,000, I'm assuming that Robbie's crew's times is not taken out of that
budgeted
portion
for
of the
there.
budget, that's just absorbed under the highway budget.
So that's something to be aware of. So I think the larger conversation will occur in November. But but John's point there is very good. And this happens with a lot of things. And
Yeah.
this comes up, it's come up a number of times where it's like, well, the highway department, Public Works can just handle this. And it's like, whoa, part of why Mr. Harbaugh's budget remains the way it does with personnel, meaning that it's light, okay, is because it's effectively managed, but the cost of doing that is that then we can't do other things. And that's how it functions, and that's part of the problem. It's fine and well, and Charles and I could argue all day about, and there's no good solution about how to account for that time in a budget. necessarily, and it does create eventually kind of a intertwangling web of string, but
Well,
you
the
have
old
to be
comment-
careful
the old
about not
comment used-
accounting for it all.
The old comment used to always be, well, we're paying them anyhow.
Yeah, which means you're not paying them to do something else.
Right. So when they're taking time out of their schedule to, not picking on Shade Tree because they do other things too, but when their time comes out of that schedule and it's not budgeted to that department or line item, you don't know it.
I mean, that's why we didn't pave an alley this year.
Right. They're busy.
It's not because the money wasn't there. It's because
Bodies weren't.
other things were going on. And then there's a certain reality too that, you know, we do have an agility program with neighboring municipalities, or municipalities in the county, let me say it that way. And, you know, we owed our piece. So our folks needed to go do what they needed to do to be right by that. But yeah, there is a problem where we just kind of take it for granted. And things like moving all the blocks are out, right? Everybody's seen them out. It's because Mr. Harbaugh gets them moved there on regular compensation time as opposed to overtime. And if you've never seen them undo them, you probably should check that out tomorrow night because they're very quick about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it minimizes the expense of that. But yeah, something to be aware of, for sure. So that's 455. 465. This is your community development. So this deals with all of your non-governmental appropriations, as they're labeled, although you could argue some of them are quasi-governmental. Main Street, Gettysburg is 465, 541, pardon me. Rabbit is 543. Rabbit, of course, isn't funded by the state unless we pay those funds. That's just something to keep in mind. And for the Arts Council, that's 465, 545.
What you don't see in this is the request from the Office of Aging. Many moons ago in previous budgets, council did appropriate funds for them, but at some point in the not too distant past, the previous council made a decision that that's more of a county function, and so it's no longer here. Just so you know, they did request money, but.
I think we also went without a request for a few years.
Sorry?
I don't think we had requests for a few years.
During the
there,
COVID
too.
time, that's correct.
I think it had more to do with the retirement.
So they're asking for an appropriation this year? then?
Yes, they
I think
are.
after Mr. Niebler retired, there were a few years there was somebody else there and they didn't ask for anything and we didn't send it.
So just so you know, they asked, so if that's something you're interested in, we can add it or just leave it out.
What was the amount? Do you know? Was it, just curious?
465A.
Exhibits or where it's at. Yeah, it is.
They're not asking for a specific
There's
amount,
no
they're just
number.
asking for an amount.
They didn't specify.
That's not, I'm reading the letter right now.
Yeah, see, I'm looking at it too, and it doesn't, it gives a number, articulates that they've provided $81,000 worth of services to 68 borough residents,
81,000 for borough residents, right?
dealing with home delivered meals, supporting people in their homes, senior centers, adult daycare, emergency response systems, transportation, but there's no, there's no figure. I don't know what to tell you about that, except that it's not there. So are there any desire to make any adjustments or additions there at 465? Does anybody want to contact them or anything like that? Okay. So then you'll see interfund transfers in 492, which includes.
These will really fluctuate
And
depending.
this all, yeah, this
Yep.
whole area, actually, the budget really is, this is what happens after you make all the other decisions.
Correct.
So, basically what ended up happening here is we wrapped up Fund 1. And I see, okay, so what happens now in this document is then it starts to cycle back to the other funds.
Right.
All right. So how do you want to?
Well, in the interfund transfers, the debt service number is
That's a
solid.
fixed number.
That's
yeah,
a fixed
that's
number.
That
solid
is a fixed number.
yeah.
That's
Right.
true. That
Okay.
that is what it is.
Yeah. The transfers to capital projects.
Right.
The capital projects reserve.
Right, that's in flux. How much
Nice.
ARPA you want to draw down, that's in flux, those types of things.
And our debt service has how many years left?
If all goes well, we'll be debt-free in 2029.
I'd say the last time we took was 2016, correct?
Correct. Yep, and this year, we settled the 2010 GO bond. So the only thing paying on now is the 2015 PIB loan for Middle Street and the 2016 GO bond.
And the 2016 bond rate looked pretty good for several years, and now it looks incredible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a perfect storm for the borough in 2016.
I mean, there were a lot of folks that said, "Well, why don't you borrow less?"
Perfect storm in a good way for borrowing money then.
We
correct.
had a lot of needs in the streets that had not been maintained, and I'm glad that we did that because holy smokes, interest rates are
Very high.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question about 465 and the
Yep.
request from the Office of Aging? And
Yeah, please do.
What's the protocol? I mean, would you go back to ask them what they, or we're just not funding them, or would you go back and ask them what number they were looking at? And the reason I ask is they are located in the borough, and there is, an elderly population in the borough, and I think people take advantage of that. They provide a really good service. I'm just wondering what their.
If something were to be done, I think it would be to contact them back and ask what they had in mind. I mean, I think their letter's relatively incomplete without it. What I do want to avoid is, I don't know, Charles, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a budget where it was in there.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm referring to. At one time, I mean, there was a helpful part of, there was like an application that had been drafted, which was in some ways helpful. But I can remember, probably before I came on, they would spend, the council at that time would spend a very large amount of time on Department 465.
I would be curious to know too, I mean, did they send a similar letter to the other 33 municipalities in Adams County as well? I mean, or are they just singling out Gettysburg? I mean, it is a county level service, so if they're only asking Gettysburg, that would be a bit weird.
I think that's exactly why previous council.
I know that's why it was done. It was a few lack of requests, but then it was also just an observation that it's really a county function.
I was just curious. It's kind of odd that they don't include them on their.
So
yeah.
in 2016 was the last time council budgeted for this. It looks like at $1,000.
I was going to say 1,000 stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really that long ago. Yeah. And that was a modified budget.
And to answer your question, years before that, there was some research done, and basically they only asked several of the boroughs and I think 3 or 4 larger townships.
Yeah.
And nobody else. So it wasn't across the board to all
Not
municipalities,
being
even
done.
though they had customers, so to speak, in all municipalities in the county. I'm thinking Gettysburg, Littlestown, and New Oxford. Were the 3 boroughs, Sarah, do you remember that?
I think you're right, yeah.
I was just curious.
No, it is. It's interesting sometimes how these things operate because I don't know that they operate. There's one at Oakside Park outside Biglerville. I don't know if they operate that or if that's operated in some other way. If
You
the
mean the
JC's
Office
up
of
there.
Aging there?
Well, there's like a senior center there. It's not very big, but it sits right along. I guess it's along 294, 234. I forget which.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's not very large, but it's there. I don't know that they operate that. All right, So shall we begin to talk about, I really think, Charles, when we look at all the other funds, most of the conversation's probably going to be in expenditures, I would think.
And I'm sorry, I didn't.
Expenditures, as we start walking through the other funds.
Yeah, that's where we start
That's
getting
where
into
it's
our
at.
bigger dollar
Is,
items
you
as
know,
capital projects and things.
What do you
yes.
want to do and what don't you want to do? So this document goes by fund number.
Correct.
So the first is.
So the first big fund in department, if you look at it by department, it would be police services. So we should probably skip over that because there's a lot of security initiatives in that department. So it'd be better to have Chief Glennie here for that discussion.
We should go to another document.
Sorry?
We should go to another document
How do
to
you-
follow through. How do you want to?
Yeah, I'm still in that same, I'm just going down by fund. How do you want to?
Yeah,
Is there
so-
a particular one you want us to direct us to, or? Yep, that you would prefer, we can do that.
If you go to the meeting folder where our budget is located, you'll see 4 subfolders. Expenses, if you look at that,
Department detail.
you'll see department detail, and then each department is listed there.
Okay.
So, for example, we could probably deal with 430 if you'd like, because there's some big expenditures. in
Public
that-
Works.
In Public Works, correct.
There's that document 430, Public Works.
You see the first few pages is Fund 1 in the orange.
Yep. Scrolling down, it looks like page 11 of 12 is where you get to.
Correct.
Fund 18 capital projects.
Right. So here's where you get into the leaf vac truck. Some upgrades
The
to our
grant-funded.
ERP.
Which is grant funded, yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it does articulate there that you have $300,000 from grant money that will also show in the revenue side and $142,400 for the borough's share.
Correct.
And that's money we already committed to.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I said, that's not really a.
So then if you go down, the next one is Fund 30. So you have some expenditures there as well.
So you're looking at 430,
430?
740, right? The,
Fund 30, 430, 740, correct.
which is your machinery and equipment.
The 79,400.
Correct.
That's what I'm looking at. Yeah, 79,400. Okay. So I'm trying to interpret this.
Yeah, Robbie, do you have any more detail on that?
I mean, I see the leaf truck in that, which I don't understand because we already dealt with that.
Right.
I do not have any more
But I
details.
see a chipper.
Bandit chipper.
That's, yeah, I'm trying to, it's kind of runs together.
That will be applying for another DEP grant with that money. That'll be the matching for the
So this is
chipper
a match
grant.
for another grant application?
Oh, okay. So
Oh, I see.
I'm now understanding as I read this.
Yep.
So you previously had, I don't really understand why it appears twice though. You previously had money set aside for the cost share on that
Mhm.
vacuum truck, but this satisfies the rest of it.
Right.
So I guess what I don't quite understand is why it appears in both Fund 18 and in Fund 30.
You know,
It kind of seems like we're accounting for the same expense twice.
you reading the notes, Robbie? On
Not
that?
totally sure that
Yeah,
I
I
Is
follow.
can
any
see
of that
that.
making sense? may be very well may be a duplicate.
I think it is.
So this is capital reserves anyway, so I'm guessing this is a duplicate, actually.
Normally, don't we move money from capital reserves to capital projects before we spend it?
Yes, that's.
I think that's why that kind of red flags for me to begin with.
So, I think 79.4, was that the number last year, Robbie, before the
Yes.
price went up?
Yes.
Okay. This was just carried over in error, it appears, because the new number that the local matches, it's 142, which is why we made the commitment we made earlier this year. So
Right.
this is an error.
So that line goes to zero and that's
Yep.
Which
extra.
one is this? The one on?
30, 430, 740.
740.
Okay. So in Public Works, there really are no surprises because it's basically the leaf vac truck.
Right, right.
Surprises are good. Is there another department you think we should go to next?
Yes, we should investigate. The next big one would be 445, actually.
445,
Yep.
parking facilities.
Parking facilities.
There are multiple proposals in 445. Becca, where do you want to start?
Right, does that computer software?
Yeah, that's our ERP upgrades, but there's multiple other. Butts ticketing, the counter, I mean, what do you want to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, we can do the bus ticket, it's fine.
Okay.
That's fairly easy, I think.
Yep.
That is the door upgrades.
What number is that?
Be 18,445, 374.
374.
Item C.
You mean you're replacing your meter domes, or no, the credit card, merchant free?
So that is it's the door upgrades to make our current kiosks touchscreen.
Fund 18,445, 374.
We're on page 8 of 9.
Yep, page 8 of 9, it'll be blue.
Yeah, okay. There I am, thank you, thanks. Yeah.
So we saw a demo of these units last week. I had asked Becca to look into whether upgrades are available or feasible. The garage generates a pretty amazing amount of revenue for the borough, and it also generates a pretty high quantity of complaints. The kiosks as they currently exist are not terribly user-friendly. That's the most common complaint. So we had a demo. This would be to replace just the doors as opposed to the entire unit. So all three together would be just over 10 grand just to replace the doors. That would be a touch screen that has a safety glass on it that's almost indestructible. And then we also asked them to bid more contemporary payment processing. We would keep bill acceptors, but we would also upgrade the card processing to include tap and chip.
That fee is not on here yet, because they
Not-
didn't give us that, this quote was long before they came, this quote was the original quote they had given us for the doors before they found out that we wanted the tap. So they have not given us a quote for the tap yet, so that is going to be additional.
Okay. So that's the concept here, is to, wherever we can, make this service more accessible and easier to use, hopefully reducing the number of complaints the parking department has to field, as well as businesses that happen to be within a close proximity to those kiosks.
Thoughts about the, understanding that this number sounds like it's incomplete, but thoughts about the kiosk upgrades?
I wouldn't think that this would go above 15,000 even when they come in with a new quote.
No, they seemed to feel it would be a few $100s per door for the alternate payment methods.
When you say door, what are you actually referring to?
So if you look at the front of the kiosks in the parking garage, they stand about 5.5 feet tall. There's a lower door, which is where currency is collected, and then there's an upper door that has the screen and all of the buttons and the receipt printer attached to it.
I would refer to them as doors, that's what I'm confused.
Yep,
Okay.
so that entire door opens up, all of the computer stuff is inside, so that door would just be the replacement.
I was in the garage today, and you can just use your app too, you don't even have to use the.
You can.
The kiosk,
Yeah,
which makes
you
it
could.
pretty convenient, yeah. Thank you for, I was thinking doors.
Well, it is a door. You
Yeah.
just open it and it swings open.
Okay.
The thoughts about upgrading the kiosks?
Anything to make it easier, because I think people do complain, I think people get, like, frustrated, and if they have to be somewhere at a certain time, they feel like they're late because they're hung up at the kiosk, so.
So being directly adjacent to the garage, I do personally receive a lot of complaints about the kiosks. The folks who, I'm going to say something that's going to sound ageist, and I apologize for that, but the folks who tend to not use the app tend to be older, and you're welcome. And the kiosks as they currently exist are not terribly intuitive to use. Even with instructions, people still struggle. My understanding, if I have this correct, Becca, is that we went with the less expensive doors at the time of the installation to save some money.
Correct.
But
They did not recommend it, and we went with it for the money aspect, I believe.
Yeah.
Get what you pay for.
But they generate a pretty substantial amount of revenue for us a year, annually. Becca sent me those numbers. I think it's 200 and, let's see here. Pardon me for one moment.
While you're looking at it, I would just say, it would be great to maybe offer like a little workshop at the Sterner building for how to use the app, how to download it for people, because I've helped people to download it. It takes a little bit of time. But boy, once you do that, it's so, in your car is in there, you could have multiple cars in there. It's so convenient.
It does, and I recommend that when they call and can't figure it out, I offer to meet them in our office, and I show them, and the officers on the street will show them if they ask.
So I
and-
just wonder if we would do that as like a public service, is to have, like on a Saturday morning or something at the Sterner building where people can, on a screen, and you can show people how to do it. Anyway, just an idea.
So for
Education.
last year, revenue collected in the garage on the kiosks, both card and credit, altogether was $245,000, and the app-based revenues were $158. So the kiosks are getting substantially more use than the app is currently. Another thing they said that they would be willing to give us access to, I believe they said at no charge, would be pay by text as well, which is something that's becoming popular. They would add that as part of the service, I believe they said. So we actually have many options to make payment in the garage easier. And we asked that the touch screen, like what the content on the screen is, would be fully customizable, and as well as the flow as to how it would be used. And I suggested that it should be as simple as possible. License plate, time, pay. And they said they can absolutely configure it that way. They can also help Becca work through, implementation of special pay rates for special events like the Christmas festival. They can be sort of manipulated on the fly with new information as necessary. So for me, it feels like it's a pretty good investment in a system that's bringing in about about $250,000 a year.
Yeah, my comment would be that the one thing I always notice in the garage is the massive size of the instruction signs.
Yeah.
And that to me is indicative that what we have is not working.
Yeah.
People just don't read.
Well,
I haven't measured it.
So you are
But when I
correct.
look at a sign that might be 3x4 covered in text, I can understand why people don't read.
You are correct, but also the directions are confusing. Those machines are not intuitive to use. And I say that as somebody who's, not computer genius, but I'm tech savvy enough to use my phone. And what we have now is not easy to use.
It's clunky. It's very clunky.
Yeah. Anyway.
I'd encourage
Matt,
people
I
to
do.
download the app.
I do want to say, I know you said they said it was free, but there's a fee to the user.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise
Right.
me.
Okay.
Does not surprise me. Okay, so sounds like our kiosk upgrades would be $10,000 to $15,000 is where we're at.
Yeah.
Are folks okay with that? Seeing some nods.
I mean, yeah,
It makes it better. That's kind of where I'm at. Like, it has to be better.
I hear lots of complaints about it.
It's not great. All right, the next item there under parking, 18,445,750. So this envisions an item that would count the cars.
Yes, this is a big ticket item. It's better part of $64,000. The concern, and it's a fairly valid one, is the garage itself is difficult to find because it's on an alley in the center of an urban area. There's no direct access off of a road. So if you are lucky enough to actually find the garage and then you get into it,
No, I don't think that's a correct characterization. There are signs.
I've been in places where they're harder to find.
People find them.
Can I just ask you, switching signs, interrupt you a second. Is there a new sign now? I noticed that today. Is there a new?
it's not new. It's been there a few
4 years.
No, I
Yeah.
noticed it
About
today.
4 years ago, probably.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
On both sides. They were replaced
Yeah, the
3 to 4 years
hotel
ago.
side has a new
Okay,
one
yeah,
as well.
okay.
Um,
Sorry.
I'm only repeating what people have told me. It's difficult to find the garage. For those that have been here forever, probably not so much, but if you're new to town. Anyway, the challenge is once you're in the garage, just the way it's designed, it's not exactly friendly to turn around in and get out. And so there are times when the garage is full and you won't know it. So the request was to find a system, and they do exist, that will alert you. 2 spaces available, 200 spaces available. And then you make your decision whether or not you want to go down the alley and get into the garage. Becca, do you want to describe anything more on that?
Yeah, and there's different levels of counters as well. This one would pretty much just be like, we only have 3 levels. So it would say like level 1, there's a space open, or level 2, there's a space open. It wouldn't be individual spaces, because that is, you're talking about 195,000. To put the little, lights on each space, and then to have the individual spaces marked at the entrance to say 20 spaces open, things like that. This would just be level, and it would say like 2 spaces available.
You know how many days in 2022 the garage was full?
I don't have an accurate count. I would say 10.
tell you right off the surface, 64 grand for something we're gonna use like 10 times a year. I know the frustration of going into parking decks and not finding a space. I do. But that just seems like a lot of money for something that seems pretty optional.
I would counter before you start going down the no direction, just to consider something else for long-term planning. We do have the Gettysburg Station site, which is getting ready to be built. So I do think the demand on the garage is going to increase.
Right, but you could purchase this type of item at any time, right?
Sure, yeah.
I would also say that I think one of our hopes, I think, is to make this, this is a pedestrian-friendly community, to try to encourage people, to drive people to the garage where they would park there, and then they would go about their business, whether they're going to a museum or whether they're going to a restaurant or an event or attraction or something like that. And so I think could do a lot to eliminate the frustration late, so I probably wouldn't have an extra 30 minutes to get out and look for another place, before I get to the wedding site. So.
We're also going a long distance, so
Yeah.
it was from here, so we had to allow for traffic and all that.
So I would just, I would argue for this, and again, maybe I'm feeling a little selfish just because I field a lot of complaints about the parking garage. It might only be 10 days a year, but I'm going to guess there's probably another 20 to 30 where it's extraordinarily full. It is really, really common for there to be a weekend where there is a live show at the Majestic, at least one, if not two weddings at the hotel, some sort of festival or pageant somewhere in town. Homecoming, parents' weekend. We have increased usage by students who are buying long-term permits. I feel like it's more and more common for the garage to be very full. And the events that we are bringing people to town for, whether that's Pride or whether it's the Christmas festival, these are events where we want it to be easy to visit Gettysburg, and if you have to drive all the way to the roof deck only to find out that there's no parking and then turn around and drive back out and still have to try to wrestle to find street parking, you get very frustrated about your visit to Gettysburg.
It's not very customer friendly if you operate in that regard,
And so I would just like to, really drive home the fact that it's not just that there's, events in Gettysburg, it's that there's often overlapping, simultaneous events in Gettysburg. And those days where parking is scarce, it's because we've brought a lot of people to do a lot of different things, and most of it's within a couple square blocks of that garage.
Last Saturday, for example.
Last Saturday is a great example. Apple Harvest, a wedding at the hotel, the Gettysburg 30th anniversary at the theater, homecoming. I mean,
it was busy.
Yeah.
Stack it all on top of itself.
Yeah.
What do folks think?
I'm in favor of I'm in favor of it per floor, a lighted, there's two on the second level. There's 10 on the third level, so that each, as you're driving up, you see some lighted ticker that says there's this on this level, there's this on this level.
As you bring that up, can we do that?
So that's what
Because you did mention by level, but these people don't pay by space, they pay by plate.
Correct, and I was waiting for a pause to say that I have not seen it. They're telling me it's possible, but we have permit holders in the garage too. So unless you're designating, we have. I didn't look at the number of permits, but let's say we have 80 permit holders. That system doesn't know that that person's a permit holder. It's counting the vehicle. It doesn't know that it's a permit. So I don't know, like I said, enough about it yet. They just quoted the price and said that it could be per level. I'm not sure if that's by cameras and it checks the plates and talks to the system.
So maybe we should discuss this in principle, and then it sounds like we need some investigation to whether or not the technology works with what we're doing. But in principle, I guess I'm asking in principle, do you support the idea?
In principle, I do. So but back on the permit, so the permit, they're not guaranteed a spot?
They're not.
No.
Well, there's your problem.
Well.
Because if they were, then
So
you
we
could
have
say-
reserved spaces.
We're
Because if they
getting
were.
ready to move to if permit parking is going to be on the lower level.
Right, because if you
So-
knew that and they were guaranteed,
So they will be.
then you would count that
So
automatically.
the idea is if you're selling on average 60 permits per month, you wouldn't have more than 60 reserved spaces.
Correct.
Right.
And then that counts the ticker, that's already gone.
Well, the car that comes in with the permit would be
Right.
included in that. They would have a designated place to go in
That's
the
my point,
garage.
is that
Right,
then, yeah. you
right.
just-
And is it counting by an actual like mechanical means, or is it counting by this number of things been paid in the kiosk and/or app right now?
No,
No.
it's counting
It's-
cars
it's-
running over.
The
Via
count-
mechanical means
There'll
of some
be,
sort.
there'll be a counter at the
electronic eye or
entrance and a
something like
counter
that.
at the exit, and they just add and subtract 24/7.
It's counter loops in the ground, kind of like when the gates were there, that knew that a car was there to raise the
Right, or
gate.
you go over a pneumatic tube or
It's
whatever.
counting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of that, for sure. Improving, going towards that. And I don't even think that that's enough, but it's a step forward.
Butterfield.
The last time I was at Baltimore Airport parking garage, their system did not say there are 3 spaces available on this level. It said either parking is available on this level or parking is not available on this level. It didn't count them. So even if there were 4 available and you only needed 1, it didn't matter that there were 3 others. That just might be a less expensive option than programs that count all the way.
I think this is your least expensive option, to be honest with you.
Mr. Lower?
Once we start getting into counting specifics on different levels, that price is going to go up.
In principle, I'm in favor, but I don't understand, when you start talking about levels, the way our garage is built, it's very confusing.
Yeah. Because it's basically one large
Because
ramp.
people, right, they're all ramps. People think of levels as the flat level.
Their level.
So you can argue that it's 3 or 4 levels, but it's in actuality, it's like 6, 7.
Yeah, that's actually
Yeah.
how we numbered them. Each half ramp is we're calling a level, right?
Yeah. So, but, yeah, I use a lot of parking garages at airports and other places, and I'd say 95% of them are simpler to use than ours.
Mr. Berger?
I'm for it in principle, but 60,000 seems pretty high to me.
Oh, I think that's low.
Today's technology, you pay for it.
Charles, what did I can't remember, the ones with the individual lights, I think they said 500 and some per space. That's how we ended up with 195.
We don't have enough business for those systems.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on.
So keep it in principle.
Oh, that's resoundingly what I've heard. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should, Becca, you should, though, find out, let's make sure this thing's gonna mesh or whatever.
Yeah.
Or at least get a little insight, I guess, into how it works. For the number that's been budgeted, how does it work?
Okay.
Is this a laser eye? Is it a camera system? Is it pneumatic? What's it do?
And I think we should also pay attention to the lesson we learned, which is if we go cheap sometimes, it adds to the frustration.
Well, I wanna make sure that if we're gonna buy it, it's gonna work.
We wanna,
Yeah.
whatever we're buying, we wanna, make sure.
Yeah, don't take a discount to get antiquated equipment like we did in the past.
I worked for a newspaper years ago that bought all their equipment, all their computers that was just going out of business, so nobody was.
Yeah.
Okay, let's.
She didn't.
Okay.
In
The excuse for not putting
in Fund 3, Department 411,
411.
which is our fire services, over in Fund 3.
Yep.
was no longer produced. They were trying to sell them.
So you want to look at Department
and
411.
She bought it.
And then you'll see Fund 1 and 3 listed in Department 411. That just represents the expenditure of doubling of the millage there to 249.
Okay.
I don't think that's a controversial point.
I
Okay,
don't think so. If it is, now would be the time.
yes.
Based on the
Okay.
knowledge increase.
Yeah, that was that work session. But if you want to bring it up, yeah. Right. Fund 4 is
Fund 4 is CDBG.
CDBG.
Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Where are we now?
Which one are we?
Fund 4, you would have to go to department.
465? No, it's in the community development.
I'm trying to see where that shows.
It's confusing, so it's between two different versions of this. What department was that in?
392.
Sorry?
392. I think. Or
That's a revenue number.
Yeah.
okay.
You need a 400 number.
Yep.
For,
409.
What is it?
409? No. No, I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
439.
439.
Roads and alleys.
Yep. So here you can see in Fund 1 and 439, we have envisioned the engineering studies for the intersections of concern. We have another 50,000 for alley maintenance and 5,000 for street. So that's on top of what was already moved over.
Right. This envisions the flap grant.
Correct. So
Commitment
that's
that's
now
there.
Department 18.
Yeah.
439 roads and alleys. So here we have the Gettysburg Gateway Connectivity Project. 313 represents the borough's portion of that.
And
We also have an
370
additional 328 for the inner loop.
Say 378 is your interloop. So those are both projects that really have been committed to.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, I guess you could discuss those as up for debate, but I don't know that I really would.
Liquid fuels is Fund 39, Department 439, or 35, Department 439.
Why am I not going to the next page?
Robbie, do you want to talk about liquid fuels expenditures and liquid 35 at all, what you typically use?
Okay.
Put you on the spot.
So, before 32, 200, is that where you want to start?
For Fund 35,
Yeah.
439.
Oh, 439.
Roads and alleys. There's always some liquid fuels.
Oh, I don't have the same thing here.
Not showing anything. Did you say Fund 9?
35,
Fund 35.
just liquid fuels.
So,
Oh, highway maintenance materials, that's pretty minimal. Yeah.
Is that 20,000 for highway maintenance materials is our coal patch that we get.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 20,000, I have no idea what that is for.
We typically budget something in that line item. Unless you don't plan on,
Was that,
you're not,
it's not for engineering, correct?
no.
No, it's construction of
Construction of
roads. but-
roads. So if you don't want to use any liquid fuels, we can cut it.
I mean, you're probably looking at what your revenue was or is anticipated to be in liquid
Right.
fuels.
Because
and you
I
come
didn't
up with
take
that.
anything out of that this year.
No, we've been banking that.
Right.
Largely, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Several years we've been banking it.
Yeah. Just with
So
the
if you don't think you're
awareness,
gonna
yeah.
use any liquid fuels funds for road work next year, we can cut it.
No.
You have it for another year.
Yeah. Okay. Bridges, 438. Chad, do you want to talk anything about that?
I don't think we had bridge work for.
No bridge work for next year?
No. I think next year's a off year for bridges and for the parking garage. Do we have anything in there for that?
Not for the garage, we don't.
Yeah, that's it.
So that 120,000 can go away then.
For the bridges as well?
Yep.
Yeah, that was for, we don't need anything for bridges next year.
Okay. I think the only other big one was 410. There's a lot floating around on 410.
Oh, police
Right.
department. Right. We're not gonna talk about that tonight.
Right. While people are looking around for some other things, I would note that based on the conversation from the last time, over in the revenue side of things, I did adjust the police overtime,
Yeah, I saw that.
decrease it by 20,000, and I increased the expected revenue for the overnight stay in the garage by another 25,000 or so, based on our projections there. So cut a little, added a little over in revenue.
Do you want to talk about 409, Welcome Center? Grant writing and architectural.
Yep, I'm getting there. Yes, and Fund
18,
18,
409,
409, 310, professional
Page
services. This is Crabtree Rurball, our architects. So they have a subcontractor there. That's Paragon Engineering for 33,000.
So this is just getting things shovel ready. Is what we're
This is everything designed to get shovel ready. You see 409, 313, 10,500. That's for CS Davidson engineering work.
It's the what, engineer?
CS Davidson.
Oh, okay.
See our upgrades to ERP software. 27,000 under 409, 373 is work for this building, largely painting and caulking and sealing. Those types of things. And you see we have some replacement computers budgeted there as well.
Okay, I'm not sure that I saw anything else before we get to 410 next week with the chief.
I agree.
Are you on 409?
Yes, that's where we're at right now.
409's General Government Services.
Can I ask a silly random question?
Sure.
Yes.
I know what ASCAP and VMI licenses are, but why does the borough need them?
Okay, so years ago, fun little story, fun little fact. We had this little thing called Tuba Fest
Outside.
outside.
On property.
And everyone had a great weekend. Monday morning, I got a phone call from these folks. Someone turned the borough in. And as a result, to be legal, we need to have these licenses to play music in the public realm. However, because the borough has the licenses, anyone now that plays music at a festival or whatever at the rec park is covered.
I just laugh because I deal with it all the time. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Just throw trash in. Sure do.
So someone was a Grinch that year.
That's funny.
Maybe somebody was hurt by one of the instruments. Or
Right.
or maybe they were offended by it.
All right, so I think we're done until the 30th.
Okay, sounds good. Everyone enjoy the parade tomorrow.
The garage will fill tomorrow.
Of course. And the parking, 4 p.m.
All right.
Parking at 4 p.m.
So, seeing no public comment, are there any elected officials' comments? If not, we will adjourn to executive session.
Yeah, just leave one.